Hello, everyone. This is Mike Huckabee, U.S. Ambassador to Israel from the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. Last week, a historic event as over 1,000 U.S. evangelical pastors came to Israel to see firsthand what this country is all about. My friend Dr. Mike Evans put together this remarkable pilgrimage for the pastors who came, and many of them, when they got back home, had people asking them questions about what they saw, what they heard, and also questions about maybe the allegations of Israel and what they're all about. Dr. Evans asked me would I answer some of those questions, so I said, sure, I'd be happy to do it. Let me share with you some of the questions as well as some of the answers. One of the questions that many people were asked, is Israel a genocidal nation? The answer to that is demonstrably and laughably no, they're not. To be genocidal, to actually commit a genocide, you have to intentionally try to kill civilians, and not just kill civilians, but to kill all of the civilians within a particular area. That simply never happened in Gaza. A lot of people seem to forget that the war in Gaza was started when Israel was attacked, a shocking attack on civilians who were waking up on a holy day and then were viciously attacked from terrorists coming over from Gaza. These attackers didn't come just to kill, but to massacre and to mutilate. The horrific things that they were done to the civilians that day are unspeakable. Israel had every right to defend itself. Over 1,200 of its people had been murdered, over 250 taken hostage, 42 of them Americans. Israel launched an effort to get the hostages back. Hamas stubbornly and steadfastly refused to give the hostages back. Israel had no choice but to go against what became an ongoing war as Hamas fired rocket after rocket into the civilian territories of Israel beyond the October 7th massacre. This war could have ended October the 8th if Hamas had simply given the hostages back and had decided that they needed to end the war, but they didn't. And it took force, and it took President Trump's absolute threat and promise that Hamas would be no more to get them to finally end the war, have a ceasefire, and return the hostages. If Israel had wanted to do genocide, they could have done it in 2.5 hours. All of Gaza is the size of Las Vegas. Israel showed in the 12-day war with Iran that it has the military capacity to do extraordinary things. It could have wiped out Gaza. It's a small area, but it didn't do that, and it tried to prevent civilian deaths. The reason that so many civilians have died in Gaza is because Hamas pushes their civilians into harm's way rather than protecting them. So the answer, no, Israel is not genocidal. A second question some have had, is Prime Minister Netanyahu a war criminal? Again, to say someone is a war criminal requires that you have actual evidence and that a person has specifically done things with the intention and the direction to harm, kill, and maim civilians. That has simply never been established. As somebody who's living here and who's lived through a good bit of the war, I can tell you that such charges are the charges of misinformation and, frankly, of sheer ignorance. That is not the case, never has been, and those who make the accusations don't have the evidence to even bring it to a reasonable sense of charge. A third question. Was Israel's attack on Qatar without cause or merit? Well, let's be real clear. There's been some talk that Israel attacked the country of Qatar. It did not. It did, in fact, send a missile to attack a terrorist who had been partly responsible for the murder of Israeli citizens, but it did not attack the country. There was one missile. It was aimed at one person. Now, unfortunately, there were some people who were near that missile strike that were injured or killed from it. But that was not an attack on the nation of Qatar. If that's the new standard, then the United States must apologize for going after Osama bin Laden while he was in Pakistan being protected by the Pakistanis. Once again, we can't apply a different standard to Israel than we do to every other nation. A fourth question that we have is that, do the Palestinians have a right to be recognized as a state? That's a much bigger discussion that has to be decided, really, by both Israel and the Palestinian people. And in order for that to happen, there must be serious reforms. There must be a clear recognition of Israel's right to exist. And there also has to be negotiations between the two countries. It's a far more complicated issue than we have time to go into right now. A fifth question. Does Palestine have a legitimate claim to disputed territories? The question is disputed territories. Israel has existed in this locality for 3,800 years since the time of Abraham. There have been many iterations of people living in the area. The term Palestinian is a term that is a geographical term. It referred to not only people of Arab descent, but it also referred to people of Jewish descent until 1962, when Yasser Arafat took the term and created the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Prior to that, if you spoke of someone who lived in this area, whether it was under the Ottoman Empire of the Turks or the British Mandate when Britain ruled, if you'd used the term Palestinian, you would have been referring not just to an Arab, you would have been referring to a Jew as well, because it meant the area, not a particular ethnicity. Another ridiculous charge was Israel involved in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. It's one of the most baseless conspiracy theories that has happened. People have made these wild, reckless allegations without a shred of evidence, but I can tell you it makes no sense. Charlie Kirk, who was a friend of mine, never would have had any reason to have been on a target list for Israel. He loved Israel. He visited here often. And I know that because when I left my daily television show to come here to be ambassador, many people may not realize that I turned that television show over to Charlie Kirk. I was with Charlie in Phoenix just before I came to Israel. One of the things that he said to me, witnessed by several people, was that the only thing he could ever imagine that he would want to do in the world of government would be ambassador to Israel because he loves the country. Again, reckless conspiracy theories and allegations. Number 7, disagreeing with Israel, is it anti-Semitism? Well, of course not. It's not anti-Semitism to disagree with the government of Israel. Heck, half the people in Israel disagree with the government in Israel. Just like we disagree with the government in America sometimes when we don't like what they do or what its leaders may say. Israel is a democracy and people have the right to express themselves and to vote, put people in power, and to vote and take them out of power. Once they're in power, they have the right to express themselves and to say what they really think. It's not something that exists pretty much anywhere else in the Middle East because it does stand alone as a democracy. It's anti-Semitic when people apply a different standard to Jewish people or to the people of Israel than they do to anyone else. That's what anti-Semitism is all about. This is another question: that is Israel blackmailing the U.S. government with the Jeffrey Epstein files? Again, what a ridiculous kind of unfounded, unverified allegation. It emanates from someone's imagination, but nobody's provided one shred of evidence to indicate that there's any truth to it. Reckless allegations, whether it's against an individual or a country, are just that. They're reckless and they're harmful. Just like no one would want to have people say crazy things about them individually or their families, people ought to push back when anyone, whether it's a podcast host or just somebody making a speech, gets up and says something as unfounded as that somehow Israel was behind Jeffrey Epstein. And is there any strategic reason for the U.S. to support Israel? Quite frankly, there is. The enemies of Israel are the enemies of the United States. Maybe you weren't old enough to remember in 1979 when the Ayatollahs took power in Iran, but I certainly was around. I already had children by then. And I remember very well that 46 years they have said, death to Israel, death to America. Israel is the appetizer. The U.S. has always been the entree. The fact is, our strategic alliance is more than just a convenience. America gets as much, if not more, in our partnership with Israel than Israel gets from us. In the field of intelligence sharing, terrorist plots that would have killed Americans, perhaps someone from your family, was thwarted because of the intelligence sharing that we have with Israel. There are military capacities that we enjoy because of the development of those capacities from Israel, who had to battle test them because they are at war and they have been in the middle of combat. And many of those innovations have also been useful to the United States and would have cost us billions of dollars. Now, there are other simpler things, medical devices that may have saved you or someone in your family's life, developed here in Israel. Agricultural technology that has expanded the capacity to grow and to harvest food, developed here in Israel. In many cases, then exported to the United States. Some have estimated that there may be as much as a 1,200% return on investment of whatever it is the U.S. invests here for that which U.S. citizens benefit. A good example of that is that most of the military hardware, many of the technological advances that may be initiated or developed originally in Israel are then brought to the United States to be manufactured and scaled up for global distribution. That means Americans go to work and have the jobs. I'll give you a quick example. Offshore in the Mediterranean, there is a massive gas platform that supplies natural gas not just to Israel, but to Egypt and Jordan as well. That platform was built in Corpus Christi, Texas, by 1,200 Texas workers who had jobs for quite some time building that platform that then was assembled in Israel on the Mediterranean and now supplies gas. That's not just something that helped Israel. That's something that created American jobs. It's fine to criticize Israel if you find something to criticize, whether it's their government or their culture, that's okay. But it's not okay to make reckless, false, and unfounded allegations against the Jewish people or against the state of Israel.